Have you ever walked into a quiet room and felt something sacred in the silence? That's what aging past 75 can feel like. The volume of the world turns down, and in the stillness, you begin to hear something else. Something deeper. If you're watching this, it might be because part of you is wondering, what now? What now, after the children are grown and the house is quiet? What now, after the career is behind you, and time, once so hurried, begins to stretch long and slow? What now, when the days feel both full and somehow empty? Maybe you've begun to feel invisible, like the world is racing ahead while you stand still. Or maybe you're doing just fine, physically, mentally, but you've started to notice little things. You forget why you entered a room. You tire more easily. You sense that some friends are slipping away, not because of conflict, but because of time. And most of all, you wonder, is this the beginning of the end? Let me tell you something, heart to heart. No, this right now can be the beginning of the most peaceful, intentional, soulful chapter of your life. But only if you choose it. And that's why this video exists. Not to lecture, not to pressure, but to gently shine a light on 7 quiet habits that might be stealing your joy, your strength, your time. They may seem small, but like a slow leak in a roof, they can quietly wear you down, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And when we stop doing these 7 things, not just one, not just occasionally, but truly let them go, something beautiful happens. We begin to feel lighter, clearer, more ourselves. So please stay with me through each one. Not because I have all the answers, but because I've walked alongside many elders who've whispered truths in hospital rooms and park benches and quiet morning kitchens. And their wisdom echoes here. Think of this as a warm cup of tea for the soul. A conversation between kindred spirits. Are you ready? Then take a breath. Let's begin with the first thing to stop doing at age 75. Stop saying it's too late. What if I told you that one of the most dangerous things you can believe after age 75 sounds completely harmless? It doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It just whispers. It's too late. Too late to start painting. Too late to reconcile. Too late to travel, to write, to love again, to change. And because it whispers in such a soft, familiar voice, many believe it. And slowly, they stop reaching, stop dreaming, stop living. Not because life has ended, but because they've closed the door themselves. But let me offer you something different. Not advice, but an image. Imagine an old tree. Its bark weathered, its branches sparse. To the passing eye, it might seem past its prime. But then spring arrives, and quietly, without announcement or fuss, the tree begins to bloom. Not with the same youthful abundance as before, but with blossoms earned through seasons. Delicate, strong, and somehow more beautiful than ever. That tree is you. The myth of the clock. We live in a world obsessed with time. By 30, you should have this. By 50, you should be here. And after 75, the world gets quiet, almost like it doesn't know what to do with you. But your soul doesn't follow that clock. Your soul doesn't know deadlines. It only knows readiness. And readiness can arrive at any hour. There are people who've written their first book in their 80s. Others who've fallen in love again at 90. Some who've finally spoken their truth after being silent for half a century. Why? Because finally they stopped believing that tired phrase, "It's too late." Let me tell you about Irene. Irene was 79 when she picked up a paintbrush for the first time since childhood. She'd been told for decades that she wasn't artistic. But one day, alone in her quiet apartment, she found an old box of watercolors tucked behind some books. She didn't think much of it. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just felt curious. That first painting was clumsy. The second, slightly better. By the 10th, something awakened in her. At 82, her daughter submitted one of her pieces to a local art exhibit, anonymously. It sold. Irene cried when she found out. Not because of the money, but because something she thought had died inside her was, in fact, still alive. She told me once, over tea, the saddest thing isn't growing old. The saddest thing is waiting your whole life to give yourself permission. But what if you fail? Let's be honest. One reason we say it's too late is because we're afraid. Afraid of looking foolish. Afraid we'll start something and not finish. Afraid we won't be good at it. But what if the goal isn't mastery? What if the trying itself is the victory? You don't need to compete. You need to feel the yarn in your fingers. You don't dance to be perfect. You dance to remember you still have rhythm in your bones. And you don't begin again because you're guaranteed success. You begin again because your spirit is still curious. Where this belief really comes from. If we look deeper, it's too late often isn't about time. It's about grief. It's about mourning what might have been, had we chosen differently. It's about the years that slipped through our fingers while we were busy being responsible, being afraid, being what others needed us to be. But grief is not a prison. It's a passage. And once you walk through it, not around it, you begin to see something. You are still here. And that means life is still offering you a seat at the table. Try this today. So here's something gentle I'd like you to do. Take out a piece of paper and write down one thing you've always wanted to try, but never did. Just one. Maybe it's small. Maybe it's silly. Maybe it's something you think people your age don't do. Write anyway. Now, write down what it would look like to begin. Not to succeed. Not to finish. Just to begin. If it's dancing, maybe it's putting on music tonight and swaying in the kitchen. If it's writing, maybe it's one page of a journal. If it's reconnecting with someone you lost touch with, maybe it's just dialing the number, even if you don't press call. The first step is the hardest, but it's also the holiest, because it says, I still believe in something, even if it's just the possibility. Closing thought. My dear friend, the truth is simple. The clock on the wall may tick, but the soul doesn't age. The soul doesn't retire. It doesn't settle down. It longs. It listens. It waits patiently for you to say, maybe now is the right time. So stop saying it's too late, because every time you do, you bury a seed that still wants to bloom. Let it grow. You haven't missed your chance. You're just arriving at the beginning of your next becoming. Stop apologizing for your age. Let me ask you something gently. When did you start feeling the need to shrink? To apologize for the lines around your eyes, the slowness of your step, the quiet in your voice? At what point did the world convince you that aging, one of the most natural, sacred journeys, was something to hide? There's a strange thing that happens as we grow older. Not in our bodies, but in our presence. We begin to step aside, to take up less space, to speak a little softer, not out of grace, but out of fear that we're somehow in the way. We catch ourselves saying things like, sorry, I forgot. Sorry, I'm a bit slow. Sorry, I talked too much about the past. And before we realize it, we've made our very existence into an apology. But what if I told you softly but clearly, you have nothing to apologize for? Not your age, not your pace, not your stories, your sorrows, or the beautiful silver in your hair. Not now, not ever. A culture that fears time. We live in a world that worships the new. New phones, new faces, new beginnings. But it forgets something ancient, something known by forests, temples, and grandmothers alike. What is old is often sacred. And yet, somewhere along the way, our culture began to treat aging like a failure instead of a passage. Instead of being honored, the elderly are often ignored. Instead of being admired, we are told to stay young, as if youth were the only currency of worth. But the world is wrong. Let me say that again. The world is wrong. Because you, yes, you, are not less because of your age. You are more experienced, more layered, more real. You are not a faded version of your younger self. You're the whole story, the weight of silent shame. When you begin to apologize for your age, even unconsciously, you begin to dim your own light. It shows up in little ways. You hold back your opinion in conversations with younger people. You avoid the camera when someone pulls out their phone. You dismiss your memories, saying, oh, that was a long time ago. You stop showing up fully because a quiet part of you wonders if you're no longer welcome. But hear this clearly and kindly. Your presence is not a burden. Your voice is not irrelevant. And your past is not a ghost. It is a garden, a living, breathing testament to everything you've endured, learned, and become. A story to remember. I once met a woman named Celia. She was 88, with eyes that had watched wars, weddings, and wide-open skies. We were at a small community event, and someone asked her to share a memory from her youth. She laughed nervously and waved her hand, saying, "Oh, no one wants to hear an old lady ramble on." But someone, a young girl, no older than 10, looked at her and said, "Ido." And so she spoke. She told a story of riding horseback as a teenager through the hills of Spain, of falling in love during wartime, of holding her mother's hand as she passed, whispering prayers in 2 languages. By the end, the room was silent. No one moved. No one scrolled their phone. They were all there with her. When she finished, the same little girl whispered, "You're like a library that can talk." Celia cried because she said later, "I had forgotten I was still full of stories." A shift in the soul. So here is your quiet invitation today. Stop apologizing for your age and start honoring it. Not with pride, necessarily, but with peace. Peace in knowing that your steps are slower because they've walked farther. Peace in knowing that your hands may shake, but they still remember. Peace in knowing that your heart, though bruised, still beats with meaning. You don't need to explain why you forgot something. You don't need to feel embarrassed for needing help. You don't need to feel ashamed of being called grandma or sir or ma'am. You've earned every one of those titles. And the person you are today is not less important than the person you once were. They're the same person, only deeper. Try this today. The next time you're about to say sorry for something age-related, pause. Instead, say, "Thank you for being patient with me." Or simply, "I'm still learning." You're allowed to take your time. You're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to be seen. And if someone looks past you because you have gray hair or a cane, let them be the ones who feel sorry. Not you. You are the elder. You are the roots. You are the fire beneath the ashes. And no one gets to silence that. A final whisper. If you remember nothing else from this moment, remember this. Aging is not a decline. It is a return to the center of who you are. You've spent decades giving, striving, proving. Now you simply get to be, unapologetically, completely, wonderfully yourself. So walk into every room, every day, every conversation, not with an apology, but with a quiet, dignified knowing, I have nothing to prove. I have everything to offer. Stop ignoring your body's whispers. The language of the soul in muscle and bone. Have you noticed that your body speaks in whispers before it screams? A small twinge in the back when you get out of bed. A flutter of dizziness when you stand too fast. That growing tiredness after a simple walk you once did without thinking. We often shrug it off, don't we? It's just age. It'll pass. I'm fiend. But beneath those quiet dismissals is something important. Something sacred. Your body is trying to talk to you. Not to frighten you. Not to slow you down. But to guide you. Because after 75, the body becomes not just a vessel, but a teacher. And if you stop listening, truly listening, you risk not only your health, but your presence in this life. The disconnection we don't notice. Let me tell you a truth many won't say out loud. A lot of older adults begin to treat their bodies like strangers. Like something they're simply putting up with. Like a faulty machine. But your body is not a burden. It's not your enemy. And it's certainly not broken. It's a home. A home that's weathered storms, carried children, lifted burdens, climbed stairs, laughed, cried, danced, fallen, and risen again. It's a home that still wants to protect you, but only if you let it. Ignoring the whispers of your body is like living in a house with a leaky roof and hoping the rain won't come. Eventually, it will. A story from the waiting room. I remember sitting once in a doctor's office beside a gentleman named Peter. He was 81. He had a quiet way about him, the kind of man who'd been strong his whole life. He was there for chest discomfort, though he brushed it off. "Slept wrong," he said. His hands were trembling slightly, and I noticed he was out of breath just from walking to his seat. I asked gently, "Have you felt like this before?" He hesitated. Then he looked at me and said, "For months," but I didn't want to make a fuss. Later, I found out he'd been ignoring signs of heart issues. He just didn't want to be a bother, didn't want to seem weak. Peter made it through, but not everyone does. All because they believe silence was strength. But sometimes silence is a warning. There are many ways your body may be speaking to you. Are you sleeping more than usual but still feel tired? Are you losing weight without trying or gaining it too quickly? Are you forgetting things that used to come easily? Have your hands become weaker, your steps more unsteady? Is your appetite fading? Are you becoming short-tempered or unusually quiet? These are not just signs of aging. These are conversations in progress, signals that something might need adjusting, not necessarily broken, but calling for care. And the sooner you answer, the gentler the healing can be. Listening to your body doesn't mean becoming afraid of it. It doesn't mean obsessing over every little change. It means becoming aware and acting early. It means saying, I trust myself enough to check this out. I love myself enough to ask for help. It means making space for rest without guilt and choosing movement without punishment. You see, your body after 75 isn't playing the same song it did at 40. The tempo is slower. The notes are softer, but the melody is deeper. The question is, are you willing to dance to it? This might mean taking naps not out of laziness, but out of wisdom. Walking each morning not for fitness, but for life. Choosing foods that nourish, not just fill. Doing small stretches while the kettle boils. Holding your balance for 10 seconds each day, because you can and you must. These aren't chores. They're acts of devotion to the home you live in, your body. Your hands may tremble now, but they remember building, holding, soothing. Your knees may ache, but they remember running after children, climbing mountains, kneeling in prayer. Treat them like you would an elder friend, with patience, care, and reverence. Speak kindly to yourself. Stop saying my stupid knees or this useless back. Say instead, thank you for carrying me this far. Let's take care of each other. Tonight, before bed, do something you haven't done in a while. Place your hand gently on your chest. Feel your heartbeat. Steady, faithful. Now place a hand on your leg, your arm, your neck, anywhere you felt tension or pain lately. And whisper to yourself, truly, I'm listening now. Because healing doesn't always begin in hospitals or pills. Sometimes it begins in that exact moment, when you stop judging your body and start honoring it. Aging isn't a battle to be won. It's a friendship to be deepened. Your body isn't betraying you. It's inviting you, every day, to slow down and remember yourself. So please, stop ignoring the whispers. Because if you listen now, you may never have to hear the scream. Stop dwelling in regret. The past is a place to visit, not live in. Let me begin with this. What if your greatest burden isn't your age, your health, or your loneliness, but your memory? Not the kind that fades, but the kind that clings. The memory of what you didn't say, didn't do, didn't become. Regret is one of the quietest forms of suffering. It doesn't yell. It sits beside you in the dark, whispering, you should have. Why didn't you? What if? And at 75, those whispers can grow louder. Because now, the years stretch behind you like a long country road. With all the missed turns, broken bridges, and places you never got to stop. And you wonder, have I wasted too much? Is it too late to make peace? Let me offer you something today. Not an answer, but a hand. Because regret is not the end of your story. It's just a chapter you don't have to reread. There's a particular heaviness that comes with age. And it's not just physical. It's the weight of moments we can't go back and change. The child we were too harsh with. The love we let slip away. The dream we talked ourselves out of. The years we gave to someone or something that didn't value us. These moments don't disappear. They nest inside us. And if we're not careful, we build our entire present around what we wish we'd done differently. But here's the truth. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to learn. And regret is not your punishment. It's your invitation. There was a man named Elias I used to visit at a senior home. Elias was 87, with the kind of stillness that makes you want to lean in closer just to hear him speak. One day, I asked him softly if he had any regrets. He nodded, slowly, deliberately. When my wife was alive, he said, I worked too much. I thought I was doing it for us. But what she wanted most was my time, my presence. And I gave her so little of it. He paused. I carried that for years. Still do. But one day, I realized carrying it didn't bring her back. It didn't fix anything. It just kept me from loving the people still here. He looked at me then, with eyes that had clearly cried before. You can't love the living while living with ghosts. We all imagine that life will give us more time, more chances, more signs, more somedays. But the truth is we made decisions with the knowledge, the courage, and the wounds we had at the time. We didn't know what we know now. And even if we did, it's so easy to forget. We are all just human, doing our best, trying to survive. You may have hurt others, but you were likely hurting too. You may have failed yourself, but you didn't know how to succeed yet. You are not your worst day. You are not your worst decision. You are a whole life. And life is not linear. Here's a shift that changes everything. Regret is not a dead end. It's a compass. It shows you what matters to you most. Do you regret not spending more time with someone? That means love still lives inside you. So give it now. Do you regret being too afraid to follow a dream? That means desire still burns in you. So honor it, even in a small way. Do you regret the way you treated yourself? Then let this be the moment you begin speaking to yourself with kindness. Because even if you can't rewrite the past, you can rewrite your relationship with it. Here's a gentle practice. Take a piece of paper. Write at the top, I forgive myself for, and let your hand move. Don't think. Just write. Even if the words are messy. Even if you cry. Even if you want to tear the page up. Write anyway. Then on the next page, right? I still have time to. And list even the smallest things. Because forgiveness without forward motion is only halfway healing. Maybe you still have time to say, I love you more often. To take better care of your body. To express your creativity. To speak your truth. To simply enjoy your life. And yes, you do have time. Not forever, but enough. The mind will never stop showing you old photographs. Moments frozen in time. Things that cannot be changed. But the heart knows how to hold those photos with tenderness and say, yes, that happened. But so did healing. So did growth. So did redemption. And that matters more. Regret is like carrying a bag of stones everywhere you go. You don't notice how heavy it is until someone invites you to put it down. So this is your invitation. Put it down. Not because it didn't matter, but because you still do. There are sunsets left to watch, books left to read, smiles to give, mornings to wake up grateful. And if you spend your days staring at the door behind you, you'll miss the one opening right in front of you. Regret teaches us what mattered. But love teaches us what still does. So go gently forward. You've mourned the past enough. Now, let the rest of your life be a love letter to the time you still have. Stop believing you're a burden. Have you ever sat quietly in a room full of loved ones and felt invisible? They're laughing, moving about, planning the day. You smile, you nod, but inside, something sinks. A small thought, almost too soft to catch at first, curls up in your chest. I don't want to be in the way. It doesn't sound like shame at first. It sounds like kindness, humility, but slowly it becomes something else. A feeling that you're no longer the center of anyone's world, maybe not even your own. And so begins the most dangerous belief to carry after 75, the belief that you are a burden. It doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in quietly, like water into a wooden floor. A delayed response to your call. A family gathering you weren't invited to because they didn't want to tire you. A sigh when someone helps you up from a chair. A glance at the clock when you start a long story. You notice these things. You feel them. And though no one says it aloud, something inside you begins to whisper, they'd be better off without my needs. I take up too much space. But let me speak to that voice directly now. Let me place a hand over it and say with gentleness and conviction, it is wrong. Completely, achingly wrong. Your existence is not a weight. It is a root that holds the tree together, even if the leaves have changed. Let me tell you a story, not a grand one, but a quiet one, the kind you might remember on a rainy afternoon. There was a woman named Lillian, 84 years old, who lived with her daughter's family. Every morning, she would rise early, long before the others. She'd sit in the kitchen and wait until the house came alive. She used to cook. She used to braid her granddaughter's hair. But over time, those tasks were gently taken over by others. They're trying to help, she told me once. I know they mean well, but some days I feel like I'm just decoration. Like I'm here, but not part of it. One evening, her granddaughter came into the kitchen, frustrated about school, unsure of who she was becoming. Lillian just listened, didn't interrupt, didn't fix anything, just held her hand. Later, her granddaughter whispered, "I don't talk to anyone the way I talk to you." That moment, that quiet, listening, loving presence, was worth more than 1,000 home-cooked meals or polished silverware. That moment was everything. Because the truth is, the value you bring to those around you has never been about what you do. It's who you are. And who you are at 75, 85, 95 is a lighthouse. Even if you no longer walk as far. Even if you forget words mid-sentence. Even if someone helps you bathe, dress, or tie your shoes. You're not loved because you're useful. You're loved because you're you. But the world doesn't always remind you of that. In fact, it often teaches the opposite. That aging is decline. That needing help is weakness. That the only valuable people are the productive ones. What a cruel lie that is. Because the older you become, the more your presence carries. You hold stories no one else remembers. You carry lessons learned the hard way. You see what others miss. The tone behind someone's words, the silence behind their smile. And that wisdom, it doesn't shout. It sits. It waits. It offers. Please don't believe that because you lean on others, you are less. Think of this. A child leans on their parents for years, for food, for safety, for direction. No one ever calls a child a burden for needing love. So why, in these final, sacred chapters of life, should it be any different for you? Needing care is not weakness. It's the full circle of life, and you're simply letting others love you in the way you once loved them. Let that in. Let your family carry some of the weight now. Not because you are heavy, but because they're strong enough to do so, because you once made them strong. And if your family isn't nearby, or if they've drifted, you are still not alone. There are others, kind strangers, caregivers, neighbors, who see you and want to help. Not out of pity, but out of shared humanity. Because we're all heading in the same direction. And how we treat our elders today is how we will be treated tomorrow. So what do you do when that voice creeps back in and says, "You're just in the way"? You pause, you breathe, and you speak back. You say, "I am still worthy of love. I'm still part of this story. I belong here." And you do. My dear friend, your role has changed, yes, but has not disappeared. You are the calm in the storm, the steady hand in uncertain times, the mirror that helps others remember what really matters. You are a reminder that love doesn't fade with age. It deepens. If you've ever doubted your worth, I hope today you let that doubt go, like a feather in the wind. Your time is not over. Your impact is not finished. There are people still becoming who they are because you exist. So please stop apologizing for your needs. Stop retreating into silence. Stop believing you're a burden. You are a gift, wrapped in years, softened by wisdom, and lit from within by a quiet strength the world desperately needs. Let yourself be loved. You deserve every drop of it. Stop holding in your feelings. There's something many people don't tell you about growing older. Something that doesn't show up in the books or the polite smiles at family dinners. It's this. The longer you live, the more emotions you end up hiding. Not because you're cold, not because you don't feel, but because somewhere along the way, you learned that being strong meant staying silent. You stopped crying in front of others. You stopped talking about the pain. You laughed off the loneliness. You buried the grief. You told yourself, they don't need to hear that. Or worse, they wouldn't understand. And so the feelings, the real ones, they sank beneath the surface. You became an ocean in still water. But what no one tells you is that those feelings don't disappear. They wait. They wait in your chest, in your throat, in the space behind your eyes. And one day, they show up, not as tears, but as tightness. Not as words, but as weariness. Not as sobs, but as silence. We carry so much that was never meant to be carried alone. Think about how many times you've swallowed your sadness because you didn't want to bother anyone. How many times you've nodded and said, "I'm fine," when you were anything but. How many times you've told stories that made others laugh, but never told the ones that still make you cry. There's a reason people feel heavier as they age, and it's not just the bones. It's the weight of unspoken truths. But here's what I want to gently remind you of today. Your feelings, even now, even after all these years, are valid. They're not too late. They're not too much. They are not shameful. They are human. They are you, and it's time to let them out. No, I'm not asking you to break down in front of strangers or pour your soul out to every person who calls. But maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop pretending that you're always okay. You don't have to be the strong one every single day. Strength isn't in holding everything in. True strength? It's in allowing the dam to break, sometimes, and trusting that the flood will not destroy you. It will cleanse you. I once knew a man named Harold. He was 86, sharp-minded, funny, the kind of person everyone liked instantly. But he had a sadness in his eyes, a shadow that never quite left. One day, when the house was quiet and there were no distractions, I asked him what he missed the most. He looked away, then quietly said, "My brother. He died when we were boys. I never talked about it. Not once. Not even with my parents." He paused, and in that pause, 60 years of sorrow sat silently between us. Then he said, "You know what's strange? I think I still hear him laughing sometimes. And I wish I'd told someone, even once, how much I missed him." He looked down, but I thought it would make me weak. That moment changed something in me. Because I saw it. How the things we don't say, they stay. And the longer they stay, the more they harden. But when spoken, even whispered, they soften. They shift. They heal. So I ask you now gently, what are you still holding in? Is it grief? For someone you lost, perhaps long ago? Is it guilt? For something you said or didn't say? Is it love? For someone who never knew how deeply you felt? Is it fear of being forgotten? Of fading away? Whatever it is, it wants light, not darkness. Even if all you do is speak it into an empty room. Even if all you do is write it down and fold it into a drawer. Even if all you do is whisper it during your morning tea. Let out. Tears are not a sign of weakness. They are proof that the heart still feels. And if your heart still feels, it's still alive. We were never meant to be stoic statues. We are oceans. Wild, sacred, ever-changing. We are not here to be perfect. We are here to be real. If there's someone you need to forgive, do it now, even if they're no longer here. Speak it aloud. I forgive you, even if it's yourself. If there's someone you still love, but never told, say it, even if it's just into the night air. There is no shame in feeling deeply. There is shame only in believing that your feelings don't matter, just because time has passed. The soul doesn't age, and neither does the need to be heard. So if no one has asked you lately how you really are, let me ask you now, and mean it. How are you truly? What have you been holding? Let it breathe. Let it move. Let it go if you're ready. And if you're not, that's okay too. But promise me this. Stop pretending you don't feel. Stop playing the role of the unshakable one. Stop hiding your sadness behind polite smiles. Let your heart show. Let your eyes mist over when a memory rises. Let your voice quiver when the truth comes out. Because that trembling, that softness, that surrender, that's not weakness. That's life. Still moving through you. Still asking to be lived. Not in silence, but in truth. And that is a beautiful thing. Stop putting off joy. When was the last time you did something just because it made you smile? Not because it was productive. Not because it was expected. Not because it was good for you. But simply because it brought you joy. That quiet, unexplainable joy. The kind that bubbles up from nowhere and doesn't ask for permission. Maybe it was years ago. Maybe it was yesterday. Maybe you can't remember. But let me ask you this gently, like a friend who's sitting beside you, hand over yours. When did you start postponing joy? When did joy become a maybe later? When did you start saving your good china for guests who never came? When did your favorite dress stay hidden in the closet, waiting for a special day that somehow hasn't arrived? When did music stop filling your kitchen while you cooked? There is a deep line many of us inherit over time. That joy is a luxury. That it must be earned, justified, delayed. Especially as we grow older, we tell ourselves things like, that's for the young, or that season is past, or what's the point now? But oh, my dear heart, joy has no age requirement. It doesn't check your birth date. It doesn't care if your knees creak or your hands shake or your hair has turned silver. Joy only asks one thing of you, that you let it in. You see, joy is not an event. It is a way of being. It is the light that flickers quietly under the routine. The laughter that escapes without permission. The softness that sneaks in through a song, a scent, a moment. It's watching the rain fall without needing it to stop. It's eating the cake, slowly. It's wearing your favorite scarf just because it makes you feel like yourself again. It's telling a joke no one gets, but laughing anyway. It's writing a letter, picking wildflowers, baking bread, singing off-key, laying in bed, and watching the light shift on the ceiling. But here's the thing, you have to choose it. You have to stop waiting. Because here's what no one tells you. Joy will not always knock twice. Joy is a visitor that rewards the open door. I once met a man named Arthur. He was 90 years old and lived alone. Every Friday, without fail, he would put on a bow tie and make himself a cup of tea in his finest porcelain. One day, I asked him why he did it. Why go through all that when no one else was around? He smiled and said, because joy still visits, and I don't want her to think she's not welcome. He lived as though happiness still had his address. What a beautiful thing. You don't need an excuse to feel good. You don't need a milestone to light a candle. You don't need company to dance. And you certainly don't need to be young to chase wonder. Because wonder doesn't belong to the young. It belongs to the willing. Sometimes the most joyful things are the smallest. A walk in the sun, the smell of lavender soap, the quiet thrill of clean sheets, the first sip of morning coffee, the feeling of bare feet on warm earth. Have you stopped noticing them? Have you talked yourself out of joy because you think there's no point? Then let me tell you this. Joy is the point. In a world that tries to convince you that your worth lies in what you produce, or how you look, or how useful you are, joy reminds you that simply being alive is a gift. And your joy, your real, unapologetic joy, gives permission to others to do the same. Don't wait until the diagnosis. Don't wait until the holiday. Don't wait for permission. We're the thing. Call a friend. Book the trip. Sing the song. Eat the dessert. Don't say maybe next year. Say yes now. Even if it's a small yes. Even if it's imperfect. Even if it's quiet. Because every day you wake up is a day joy can still find you. And what if, just what if, the last chapter of your life could also be the most joyful? Not because it's dramatic, but because it's honest, light, free, because you finally stop living for everyone else and begin living as the one you truly are. And what if your joy isn't just for you? What if someone is watching you, a grandchild, a neighbor, a stranger in the park, and thinking, maybe I can live like that too? Maybe your joy is a torch, and your laughter, a kind of medicine the world desperately needs. So, my dear, don't hold it back anymore. You've waited long enough. Joy is not the reward at the end. It is the thread that makes life worth weaving it all. Let in. Let's stay. Even now. Especially now. And if no one's told you lately, you deserve it. Not because you've done something, but because you're still here. And that is reason enough. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Your time, your heart, your presence, they mean more than you know. And wherever life takes you from here, may joy find you often. And may you be ready to let it in. Always. So here we are, you and I, after all these words, after all these quiet truths, after all the unspoken nods between souls that understand each other without needing to explain. We've walked together through rooms most people avoid, rooms filled with silence and memory, and the kind of honesty that only comes when you've lived long enough to stop pretending. We've talked about the quiet things, the things others rush past, the 7 weights that can slowly, silently gather on your shoulders until you forget you were ever meant to feel light. But maybe, just maybe, something inside you has started to shift. Maybe today you caught yourself before saying, it's too late. Maybe you stood a little taller and stopped apologizing for your years. Maybe you placed a hand on your heart and promised to listen more kindly to your body. Maybe you whispered something you've been holding in for far too long. And if you did even one of those things, then this was worth it. Because this moment, this exact one right here matters. And so do you. You see, people think aging is about winding down. But that's only the story they tell on the outside. Inside, something else is happening. Inside, you're not fading. You are refining. You are becoming more distilled, more essential, more rooted in truth. You no longer chase. You no longer beg. You begin to understand that peace is not something out there. It is something within. And yes, the body softens. The pace slows. But your soul, oh, your soul, she stands taller than ever. So if you remember anything from all these words, remember this. You are not behind. You're not late. You are not a shadow of who you used to be. You are the harvest of every season you survived. You are the quiet strength that younger hearts look to without even knowing it. You are the voice of reason in a noisy world. The calming breath in a hurried room. The steady hand on a shaking shoulder. And your presence is not just welcome here. It is needed. So keep showing up. Keep being seen. Keep speaking softly when the world shouts. Because some of us are still learning from you. Some of us still need your stories. Your patience. Your laughter. Your very being. There's a Japanese art form called kintsugi. Maybe you've heard of it. When a bowl breaks, they don't throw it away. They repair it with gold. The cracks are not hidden. They are highlighted. Because the beauty is not in perfection. It is in the story of healing. You're that bowl. And every crack you carry is a place where light enters. So, my dear friend, walk forward, slowly, calmly, wisely. And when the world tries to make you feel small, remind it gently. I am still becoming, and I am still here. Thank you, truly, for spending this time with me. If you felt seen, if you felt soothed, if something here resonated with your quiet corners, I am grateful, because that means we met, not just in words, but in spirit. Take care of yourself. Speak kindly to your soul. And never forget, the best of you has not been lost. It has simply been waiting for the right season to bloom again. Until we meet again, thank you for watching.